Welcome to Ease in Real Life, the podcast where we embrace joy, authenticity, and peace through all of life's ups and downs. I'm your host, Kijana, and each week we'll explore practical tools, real stories, and meaningful conversations to help you create a life that feels lighter and more aligned. Hello, welcome to another episode of Ease in Real Life. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you. I'm happy to be here. I'm glad you're here. Now, I'm trying to be cool with it, but guys, I realize that holding the mic like this makes it sound way better. I'm also recording this at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and consciously and subconsciously, I cannot bring my tone of voice up at this time. And honestly, I don't know if it's years of trauma, of just like, it couldn't be. It couldn't be. I think it's like something that has developed in my life, but I just cannot talk loud early in the morning. So I'm holding the mic. It's going to be closer to my mouth. And honestly, it sounds better. And I've done about 44 tests here today. And this is sounding the best. So, did you guys need all that information? Probably not. But did you get it? Sure did. We're all learning together. Again, thanks for being here. Now, today's episode is called Ritualizing Ease. And we are going to talk about the process of creating ease in your life, because it absolutely is a process. I said this last time, but it really is a lifestyle. And one thing that I've learned in my journey is that building foundation, creating patterns of ease in your life is beneficial for many reasons. One, because it gives you something to always go back to in the moments that are hard in your life. And I'll talk more about that in a second. And two, when you commit intentionally to these types of patterns in your life and you show up for yourself that way, you put yourself in a position to show up for other people as a better version of you. And for me, that is one of the most important assignments that each of us has individually. We, and I say this all the time, are here to take care of each other. We are a collective of humanity. Yes, we live individual lives, and those individual lives have individual meaning and individual purpose, and that's important. But the collective journey that we're on is also significant. And so your individual journey and the way that you show up for yourself is a really important indicator of your capacity to operate and show up within the collective. And so, yeah, that's part of why I've become committed to ease in real life, and why, I hope that this will mean something to you, or that speaking through kind of my rituals and my process and my journey of how I got here will inspire something in you, maybe. Or maybe you have a ritual that you've found to be really impactful in your life and you can share it with us. That would be amazing. So, as always, I love to tell stories. And in the last episode, I was talking about, the last couple of years, and we were kind of talking through that. And rituals and foundation have been actually really significant in my life in the last couple of years. And shout out to my friend Meg, because she was the one who really inspired this episode. A lot of times I'll kind of tell her something I'm doing or something, excuse me, that I'm working on, and she will be like, oh, you should share that. You should share that with the collective. And so here we are, I'm sharing. So thank you, Meg, for inspiring me, as you do so often. And so, yeah, so these last couple of years, my foundation has been something that I've been able to come back to time and time again, especially in these harder moments. And it really ebbs and it flows. And I want to speak to that too. And I want to be mindful about how I say this, because I think when we talk about these things, it can put a lot of pressure on people, right? Creating habits and things like that are positive and impactful in your life. It can feel kind of daunting when you're like, oh my God, like I have to do this thing every day, you know? And I just want to, right out of the gate, like speak to how we have to show ourselves grace always, every day, every moment of our lives. You are the one that you talk to the most inside your head. No one has more conversations with you or about you than you. And so being mindful right from the jump about how you're talking to yourself as you're creating these habits and patterns in your life is really important. And giving yourself grace, because this type of thing takes time and it ebbs and it flows. You might have a ritual that's really working for a while, and then it might not. And making sure that you have awareness and flexibility to adjust is also really important. Um, but again, so going back, and I'm gonna kind of just go back to like when I really started to intentionally build rituals into my life. I talk about astrology a lot, and when I really, really started to study astrology, the first thing that I kind of got into was the new moon and the full moon cycles and building rituals and practices around the moons. And so we always hear that new moons are a time to set intentions, it's the beginning of a cycle, and it's a time to speak to the universe about what you really want to achieve in this cycle. And then full moons, which are like halfway through the cycle, are a time to kind of check in and release whatever's not really working for you, especially in terms of the intentions that you set for that cycle, for the cycle that you're in. So, my first kind of foray into ritualizing was around the moons, the new moon and the full moon. And it took me a while to build up this practice, and this was back in, 2017 when I was really just kind of starting this journey. But I started, just new moons, totally isolating myself, journaling, really sitting down and thinking about, okay, what do I want to achieve in this cycle? And it was a great moment for me because that was when I was really starting to study astrology. And obviously you guys know now I like love to read charts and stuff. But this is how I learned how to read charts actually, was studying every new moon and studying what the impacting factors of each new moon were going to be and trying to fit myself into it. And as time went on and I started to understand the new moon and how powerful of a time that was, I started adding more to my new moon ceremony. So now my new moon ceremony is that when it's a new moon, as close to the timing of the new moon as I can possibly get, I will clean my altar. I will take my altar completely down, take everything off my altar. I will wash it down with some type of Florida water or, anything that I've like prayed on or um, created on my own. Sometimes I'll just soak different herbs in water and crystals in water. I'll let them sit for a month or two, and then that is the Florida water that I use. I call it Florida water. I don't know why it's called Florida water. Something to research. But that's the Florida water that I'll use for like washing my altar. And then I also wash all my doors because doors are a gateway. They bring things in and out of your life. And so I wash all my doors. um, and that is like a very kind of ancestral practice. But I read a lot of books. Spiritual books, prayer books, things like that during that time. I had a couple different like creators and stuff that I would follow, and I would just kind of read things that they were putting out. And so the doors practice, I can't, to be honest with you, remember exactly where I kind of grabbed that from, but it really resonated with me. And so, yeah, I wash all my doors. I used to wash all my floors too. Now I live in an apartment where it's rugged. So I don't wash the floors. I vacuum them and I wash the kitchen floor. But yeah, I wash all my doors and floors too. I'd get the ceilings if I could, trust me, most of the time. And then I reset my altar for every new moon, and I reset my altar, and I center in the center of my altar kind of whatever element is represented by that moon. So for example, this month we had a Pisces new moon. Just last week we had a Pisces new moon, and in the center of my altar are all my kind of water-based little things, little tchotchkes, if you will, my little water-based crystals, or sometimes water, my Florida water. I put that on my altar. I put some other waters on my altar that I use throughout the month. I use clove water to wash my face and pray. I use rosemary water for my hair. So I put those things on my altar as well, because I want them to be super powered. I want everything in my life to be super powered. And I have my ancestors on my altar. I have all different types of things that I've collected over the years on my altar, meaningful things that people have given me. Like I said, pictures of my family. Yeah, things like that. The kind of herbs that I work with, that I have like a couple of Ganesh, like little statues that I had from when I was in India. Those are on my altar. I have kindling on my altar. I have a Buddha on my altar. So yeah, I have those kind of things on my altar to remind me and to ground me into who I am and also who I want to be. And so that was like kind of one of the first rituals that I really got into. And, that's once a month that I do that new moon ritual. And again, I would also start kind of writing out my intentions. Some of my friends might remember from like when I really was first going through this, I used to text messages to my friends on the new moon and say prayers for them too. And now I do that more internally, but yeah, those are the kinds of things that I would do. And then when the full moon would roll around, I would use that as a time to really meditate on what I was trying to release. What I'm trying to let go of, what's not serving me. It's a moment to kind of check in and to, yeah, just like reconnect with, again, what I'm working on in this cycle. So those were kind of like the first rituals that I really built into my life. And again, those are, new moon once a month, full moon once a month. So those were like monthly things that I was doing. Um, and just again, like really building foundation into my life. And it got to a point where, of course, like every month as the new moon was coming, I was thinking about it. I was being more intentional with it. I really valued that time. I would feel refreshed, after I had just washed all my doors and my floors and reset my altar. I'd feel like I could breathe. You know what I mean? So that feeling also really resonated deeply with me. And then, you know, in that same time frame where I was kind of starting to build like my moon rituals, I was doing like coaching and stuff like that. And I remember that I had a coaching client that I was working with, and I was talking to her. And if you're like, Kijon, are you cross-eyed? No, I'm not. I keep looking down at the mic to make sure that it's still blinking so that I know that the sound is really good. um, but I was talking to this client, and I was saying to her, we were talking about building a regular yoga practice into her life. And she was a nurse. And shout out to Amanda, because it's like the little things that people say to you that kind of can stick with you. And she did not say this in a way that was like questioning me or wasn't like pretentious or anything like that. But she said to me, she said, "Well, how often do you practice yoga?" And I was like, hmm, like, once a week. And she was like, okay. And I just felt it in that moment, like, oh, girl, practice what you preach. You know what I mean? Not me sitting here telling you, yeah, you should have a daily practice and blah, 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 and me not having that. And it's not like, of course, I had moments in my life where I'd had a daily practice, but I couldn't even say that I had a strong, consistent practice in that moment. Of course, I was teaching all the time, but that's different. Teaching yoga is is a moment to learn, and we always try to say as yoga teachers that we're students forever. But as I say, like turning the wand on yourself and making sure that like you're grounding into the practice, especially for my yoga teachers out there, that's different. That's different. And just in that moment, something kind of just went off in me, and I was like, okay, I need to build a daily practice into my life. And as I mentioned in the last episode, as time was going on, this is when I was still living at my mom's place, and we had that studio in the basement, which I loved. That studio. It meant so much to me, and it still does, really. But the environment was changing, And so I wanted to build this daily practice into my life for me, of course, but also because like I needed to stay strong in that space. Like I needed the energy to stay strong in that space because the purpose of that space was to serve and for people to find, you know, comfort and maybe even healing there, hopefully healing there. And so energetically that I felt responsible for managing the energy of that space always. Um, and so as a way to maintain it and to manage it, I started just going down to my mom's basement every morning in the studio and just practicing yoga. Um, and sometimes I would honestly just sit in the studio and just stretch and smoke for an hour. But over time, I started doing a more consistent practice. And obviously, I'm an early riser. Um, and there were things, one of the issues in that house was noise, actually. um, and like not having a peaceful night's rest. And so I started waking up really early in the morning. And I like to wake up early in the morning, I always have. But I started waking up really early in the morning and I wouldn't be able to fall back asleep. So I would just take myself down and start practicing yoga. And honestly, as a way to fight back in the noise, I would put my music up and just practice. And so that actually kind of saved me because when I left my mom's home and I was moving around, no matter where I was, I always had my yoga mat with me. And at 5 o'clock every morning, I was up moving around doing some yoga. When I was at Ryan's house, sometimes I would leave Ryan's at 5, go walk over to our store on Birch Street, and I would practice there. And then I would go downstairs and I would start making some cookies. Um, but it was foundational for me. It was something where every morning I knew I had that, especially at a time where I really didn't have anything else. And it was key because in being able to get that time with myself in the morning, I preserved myself. I preserved my mental health. I preserved so much of my, I keep coming back to this word of like integrity, but when you're in a vulnerable state like that, you really are trying to hold on to anything that you have that makes you feel fully human and fully functional. And it was that for me. It was that practice for me that made me feel really functional and like, okay, well, I'm still able to get up every day and do this. You know what I mean? So I'm still human, even though I feel like I don't have all these other things that I know humans require. Um, I still have this. And it helped me in such an important way because also at that time, I was and still am, but the CEO of a company. And I needed to be a leader and I needed to be able to lead. And so by showing up for myself in that way, I was able to show up for the rest of the day, every day, for my team and the people around me. And it helped me again to just reframe my humanity in a moment where I felt like I was even just questioning it. Um, and one thing that I wanted to talk about too was like the difference between rituals and routine. Because ultimately, this became a routine in my life, right? Where every morning, and I added on to it, like it was yoga, but then I would journal and I would always have my tea. And like I just put my tea away, but like that's a part of my morning every morning still. And at times, when I can't access one of those things, but I can access the other, I can still feel grounded. Going back to what I was just saying about routine versus ritual, it's like rituals are routine, but they're even more intentional. Because I think that routines are something that, again, we can get really kind of lost in and we just kind of start doing it to go through the motions. But maintaining awareness is a big part of rituals. Using your awareness to guide how you work within your rituals is important. That's why like journaling it was a really, really important daily ritual for me to pick up because it's a moment to reflect honestly, with yourself about what is actually going on. And being able to reflect and have honest conversations with yourself is always going to be important. It's always going to be important. And so ritualizing even those conversations is important because, again, as I said earlier, you talk to yourself a lot in your head. And it's important to make sure that that conversation, that self-talk is mostly positive, because that's how your brain is wiring. Your thoughts control your reality, I truly believe. And so making sure that those thoughts are staying in a positive way so that your reality and your outcomes are positive too is important. And journaling was a big part of that for me. And even more so than just journaling, just recording a day, or if I'm journaling in the morning and I'm saying, oh, I hope, this happens today, or I'm praying for this today. But the more significant practice for me was actually gratitude journaling. So I started years ago writing one page every day. I'm grateful for, I'm grateful for, I'm grateful for. I was able to continue doing that in those really dark moments. That was key. That was key. When you are in your darkest hour and you can still find something to be thankful for, the universe is going to work with you on that. The universe is going to work with you on that. The universe is going to try to support you. The universe is going to conspire to lift you up and help you succeed. And so, yeah, staying grateful, that's a big one. That's a big part of my life and something that I really think can be important and effective in everybody's life. But having a gratitude practice, and my gratitude practice has evolved too. Now, instead of writing, I'm grateful for, I actually write, thank you, God. The word God was a big one for me. It took me a long time to be able to use that word comfortably. I grew up in a Rastafarian household. We don't talk about God. But my mom grew up Catholic, and had a lot of traumas with that. So I think that also kind of trickled down. Um, but God is anything. God can be the universe. God is whatever you see as the higher kind of connective tissue to this whole thing, and hopefully you can see and feel and recognize that there is some type of connective tissue to this whole thing, you know. And so now I say, thank you, God, for this. Thank you, God, for loving me unconditionally. Thank you, God, for teaching me how to love others unconditionally. Unconditional love is a great one, a great thing to tap into too in ritual as much as you can. Um, so yeah, that's my gratitude practice. Another kind of ritual that I believe in is like herbs. Like old school herbalists, like when they talk about herbs and stuff, they really talk about it as like each individual one is like a friend, a person, like they have their own identity. And they do. They absolutely do. Um, but ritualizing herbs is important. Like I was saying earlier, like I use cloves. I use cloves to pray for things that I want. And I soak the cloves in water and I use it to wash my face every morning. And as I'm washing my face with it, I pray. I use rosemary water for my hair. It's good for your hair. You should. But also, I pray when I use it. I pray over the herbs when I use them, or when I'm um, infusing herbs into things. I pray over it because being intentional is is something that will always support what you want and the outcomes that you want. And I think speaking your intentions into things is another kind of ritual that you can use when you're doing things. Um, and why not? Just putting it out there in the universe. This is what I'm trying to get out of this. When I put spray my hair with rosemary water, make it grow, please. Please, I want my edges back. I'm working on it. They're actually coming back quite nice. Um, so a story for another day. But yeah, herbs, that's something that I ritualize. Now I like to make my little tea blends. I smoke with herbs sometimes. I add herbs to like my blunts if I need to, if I'm going through something and I want to use them intentionally. I have more consistent practices with herbs, and then I have practices with herbs that I feel like, okay, this is more when I need it. But identifying some herbs that are meaningful to you and just having them around, working with them in different ways, that's a great way to, yeah, to ritualize something for yourself. Um, my face, my skincare, uh, my hair care. I was just kind of talking about it, but I ritualize those things. I have my morning skincare routine that I do. I have my nighttime skincare routine that I'm still working on. I'm still trying to get there. And we're all growing, we're all learning. And I hope that I never sound, I think I was kind of touching on this earlier when I was saying, like, give yourself grace. But I hope that I never sound like I do all this, so you should do it too. No, that's another thing that I wanted to say. Your rituals, especially if the goal of them is to build ease into your life, they have to be practical. They have to be what works for you. They have to make sense for you. My rituals might not work for you, they might not make sense for you, and that's okay. My goal here today is to just show you the kind of breadth of things that you can do, or things that I've done, again, to hopefully inspire yours. But do I expect that we should all be doing exactly the same thing? Absolutely not. And I expect that there are a lot of other kind of rituals that are amazing that I don't know. And I, again, would love to learn. If you've got one, please share, because I love to learn and I love to share. Um, Yoga, obviously, is a big ritual for me. I do try to practice daily on my own, but I also like to go to classes. But my personal practice is a little bit more significant for me. I go to classes as a treat, but what I can do on my own is my journey. That's my work that I feel like is important. And, you know, I feel like as a yoga teacher, having a daily practice is something that's really important, even if it's not daily, but most of the days. Um, I really notice that when I practice on my own, it helps me show up for my students in such a better way. It helps me build better flows. It helps me keep them safer. And it helps me stay more aligned across the board. Hiking is another thing that I love, looking for a hiking buddy. Um, but a great, like, walking meditation is something that I love. Just going for a walk and kind of meditating while you're walking, moving meditation. Those are great, 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 great practices and great rituals to have when the weather permits. I love to do those things daily, but sometimes that's not always possible. And that's okay too. In fact, I'll tell another story. Like, when I moved into my apartment, and I remember talking about this with a friend too, um, I actually kind of couldn't do my morning yoga practice. I could get up and journal and drink my tea every day, but I couldn't do the movement. And I remember feeling at first like kind of bad about it. And I was talking with a friend of mine, Laura, and she was like, that's okay. You're going to build new rituals in your new space. I was like, oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you for reminding me that just because one thing was working for me for so long, it doesn't mean it has to work forever. You can change those things. And now I do my morning yoga practice, but I kind of switch it up. Like, I do, sometimes I'll watch someone on YouTube. Sometimes I'll do my own thing. I switch it up. And I have added in a morning meditation practice that's also, I think, even more consistent than yoga for me. Like, now I'm in a place where it's like, I got to journal and I got to meditate. And if I can do those things, then I can be a person in this world. But if I can't get to those things, I just don't feel good. You know what I mean? And that's another thing too. Is like, I do what feels good for me, but I stick to what feels good for me. I think that's really important because, and again, we're going to always be talking about this, but creating ease in your life is something that you have to kind of do for yourself over and over again. And that part does take work. That part does take work. And so committing to something like that, because I know it makes me feel good, it's hard at first, but it gets easier. Which brings me to another ritual that I practice weekly, which are cleanses. And honestly, this one, I kind of went back and forth of like if I would share it or not. Not because I don't think it's important, I do, and I'll tell you guys why in a minute, but just because, like, again, this is something that it did take me a long time to really like build this into my life. I've gone in and out of it. Um, Grateful to be back in a good place with it right now, but I just don't want people, like, it can seem kind of intense, and I just don't want you to try the hardest thing first, especially if this concept of like building rituals into your life is like something you're like, okay, I'm gonna, you know, try this. But cleanses are a big one for me. I do a cleanse weekly. Every Monday is my cleanse day. Um, I started doing it a couple years ago with Ryan, actually. And I think when we first started doing it, we were doing Wednesdays, and we realized Wednesday is just too hard. Wednesday is not a good day for cleanses, but Monday is a really good day. You know, if you're someone like me who follows astrology and goes with the days, Monday is our moon day. It's ruled by the moon. And so it's already a day that's kind of like meant to be internal. You know, it's meant for you to be kind of in your emotional self and connected with your emotional body. And so it turns out it's a great day for me to cleanse. And often I'll do juice cleanses. I have a juicer. I have a Ninja cold press. I love those. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Um, but it is, I often don't juice too. Like sometimes I just do tea cleanses. As you kind of go throughout time, I think my experience has been that over time I realized like actually I just got less interested in like 4 juices in a day. You know what I mean? My body actually just doesn't need that. Part of the reason why I cleanse weekly is like I'm a snacker through and through. I'm a foodie. You guys know this. I love food. I can always eat food. I love food. I will always eat food. As a vegan, besides everything else I can't eat, anything else I see that I can eat, I never tell myself no. I always, always, always allow myself to eat what I want to eat and enjoy what I want to enjoy. Um, and I started doing weekly cleanses as a way to just give my body a little break, a little reset. And I'm a big snacker. And I'm not going to lie, there was a point where I was getting a little out of control with the snacking. And I'm a candy girl. I love, love, love candy. And I was just like eating like so much candy. It was honestly disgusting. It was gross. And did I love it? Yes. But I had to stop. I started cleansing weekly to help kind of curb the snacking desire, and it did. It really works. It really works for me. Like I said, there are times where I've fallen out of being in regular cleanses. I tend to always come back because I just feel better. I feel better in every way. So that's one thing that I do weekly. And I'm trying to see my little list here if there's other kind of rituals that I wanted to talk about with you. One thing that I will say that I don't have a good ritual of, but I want to, is like more social things. Like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the app Marco Polo, but a lot of my close girls and I, we use that and we chat like every day, all day. And I love it because like we really keep up with each other, which is so nice. It's so nice. Because again, like I live alone. So, you know, I could go days without talking to someone, honestly. If I wanted to, I could literally go days without talking to someone, just me and my cat in here chatting away. And he is a chatty Cathy, but you know, sometimes you want some human to human interaction. So like I love Marco because like it keeps me active with my girlies. Like again, every day we're checking in multiple times throughout the day, really keeping each other up to date. Um, but we don't have like a like literally we go out once a year. Like we're like, okay, it's our yearly time to go out. So I do wish that I had more like social rituals in my life and more yeah, moments that were like based in not just like socializing with people, but like actually having a good time. Because I do feel like I see you guys a lot and talk to you guys a lot, especially like in yoga or other offerings or things like that. But yeah, like that's one thing that I'm trying to build into my life. But again, just to like go back to what I was saying earlier, like the idea of creating rituals in your life is because of the understanding of like creating ease, having ease in real life is something that you have to choose over and over again. And if you make that choice now, today, and you start to build, you know, habits and patterns in your life that create that ease, yes, it is going to feel like work, especially at first, especially at first. But as you commit to it and continue to do it, it will get easier. It will get easier. Importantly, though, stay intentional. Stay intentional with it. Don't allow yourself to just go through the motions. keep your awareness high in a situation, in something that you're doing, in the habits that you're building, because ultimately it's going to allow them to really have the impact that you want them to have, and they're going to last longer. And I say that to say, like, when you go away from them for a while, if you lose them for a minute, it makes it easier for them to come back to. And when you do come back to, it's like riding a bike. You're like, yeah, I'm right back, you know? Or maybe I'm back, but I'm better. Love that. So make it practical. There's a really good book called Atomic Habits. I think Ryan and I did a review on it when we had our little book club, that I and Iberry. But Atomic Habits, I know that the author's first name is James. I can't remember his last name for the life of me. But I like that book. I did read that book at some point, and it talked about stacking your habits. And that was kind of how I built my morning routine. Like, it started with the yoga, and then I added journaling and meditation to it. And you kind of like stack them together. And same with like my face routine. You know what I mean? Again, still working on the nighttime routine, still working on that. That's another thing I'm working on. But these things take time. And I know that what I'm doing for myself right now and what I'm building for myself right now is a gift for my future me. And that's why I'm committed to it. And that's why I love to do it. And again, I love to learn. You know, if you've been listening to this episode and you're like, I've got one that it works so well and it's brought such great change to my life, please hit me up. Let me know. Um, what are your rituals though? Like I really do want to know, what rituals are you trying to build into your life? I also refer to it as like my foundation. Like, in my gratitude journaling daily, I often thank God for my foundation. This foundation, these practices that I can keep coming back to, because I understand that there's nothing perfect about humanity. You know what I mean? There's nothing perfect about us as humans. In fact, the idea of perfection, it's crazy that we even came up with that concept. I don't know where it comes from because it just doesn't exist. But consistency is there, consistency is possible, and ease is possible. Ease is possible. And so committing to that, believing in that, that will definitely bring those things. I truly believe. So yeah, what's a ritual you're working on building? I also wanted to just say thank you to everyone that listened to last week's episode and reached out, and like continued the dialogue, because as I said, like, I really want this to be a dialogue. I really want this to be a community that we build, a place where we can share resources and share information. And so thank you to the people that have reached out and continued the dialogue and have agreed to come on and chat with me here. Thank you to all of you for just like showing up for me and listening to me. I appreciate it. I appreciate just like all the encouragement and the love that I've received just in the last week. Um, and yes, a little astrology update. This week coming up, we've got Mars in Cancer still, and we've got Venus in Aries. And there's going to be a full moon coming in Virgo soon. But I wanted to kind of focus on Venus and Mars for a second. Venus is in Aries, where she doesn't love to be. She doesn't love to be. And yet, Venus is a major benefic. And so I come from the school of thought where I'm like, Venus cannot have a bad transit. I truly believe. And so even though Venus is not in her best form in Aries, I think that, especially given what we are kind of talking about right now today, the let's think about using this Venus and Aries energy to remind ourselves what we love about ourselves. Part of the reason why Venus doesn't like to be in Aries is because she doesn't like to just be thinking about her. She's a collective kind of gal. She's here for the girls, okay? She's here for us all. But in Aries, she really is forced to just kind of be with herself. And that's okay. Sometimes we are forced to be with ourselves, and making sure that, it doesn't feel like we're being forced to be with ourselves, that it's something that we can actually enjoy and appreciate our time that we have with ourselves, in solitude. I've learned to become really grateful for my time in solitude. And there's a lot of power that we can find in the moments where it is just us. And so really tapping in to that power, and like I said, reminding yourself what you love about yourself. That is something that we can use this Venus and Aries energy to guide us towards. Same time, we've got Mars and Cancer. And, again, Mars doesn't love to be in Cancer. And yet, being in Cancer is a moment for Mars to remember that, yes, the actions that we're taking are so important, and they are what motivates us and what guides us. But that Cancerian energy is always going to bring us back to the nurture, of a moment, like nurturing ourselves in a moment. And so I think we can use these energies together. I think we can, especially for those of us who have our night charts, because, Venus and Mars are the more dominant energies in a night chart. I'm a night chart person. So if you were born, mostly if you were born at night, you have a night chart. But it's always good to check it out and to see. So if the sun is below the, that center line, that shows the eastern horizon on your chart. If the sun is below it, you've got a night chart. And so Venus and Mars are going to be the more powered, benefic and malefic planets in your chart. They're gonna rule and kind of indicate a little bit more about what's going on for you than, for example, Saturn and Jupiter, which are more prominent in the day charts. So that's a little update for you. We'll talk about the full moon when it's coming. But yeah, and maybe check to see where Aries and Cancer fall in your chart, and those places will give you an idea of like how these things are impacting you and the areas that you can work on within yourself, within these themes of kind of loving yourself or reminding yourself what you love about yourself, and then to the Mars aspect, like really nurturing that, So anyways, I hope everybody has a great week ahead. Really looking forward to whatever conversations this brings up. And yeah, love you guys. Thanks for being here. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Ease in Real Life. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe. Please leave a review or share it with a friend who might need a little more ease in their life. Remember, creating ease is a choice we make every day, even in the hard moments. I'll chat with you next time, and until then, take care of yourself and each other.